When society is broken and demands for justice go unmet, these people don't shut up. They don't give up.
We are here. We are not going anywhere.
They rise up.
And I am going to stand and fight.
These are their stories. Tonight.
As they chipped away, the chant went up, Mauer weg, done with the wall.
The night citizens rose up and changed history.
The fall of the Berlin Wall is one of the most significant moments of the 20th century.
The ultimate symbol of the Cold War.
Come on, go.
This was not just a scar on the city, it was a scar on the soul of Berlin.
It divided the free from the oppressed for nearly 3 decades.
It was ultimate people power. It really was the people who brought this about.
An event that will be celebrated forever.
The fall of the wall was an epic and magical moment in world history.
This is Rise Up. The fall of the Berlin Wall. It's 1945, the end of World War II, and the city of Berlin has been devastated, punished for Hitler's sins. As the war winds down, mistrust between the Allies is on the rise, so Germany is divided into 4 occupation zones. East Germany will go to Joseph Stalin and the Communist Soviet Union. West Germany will be controlled by the capitalist Western powers, the USA, UK, and France. Berlin, Germany's capital, is 100 miles inside the Soviet zone, but the Allies agree to also divide the city between the 4 of them.
It was a remote location. It was situated right in the heart of old East Germany, which meant that you could either use a train corridor or the road corridor or air transport to get to Berlin, but you physically had to go through East German territory to get there.
From the start, the 2 sides are like night and day. In the West, an open capitalist society enjoying democratic freedoms. In the East, life tightly controlled under the ruthless rule of the Soviet communist regime.
Nobody knows what Soviet Russia and its Communist International Organization intends to do in the immediate future. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.
By June 1948, tensions between the 2 sides are at a breaking point. The Allies refuse to allow the Soviets more say in the economic future of Germany. So Stalin blocks off all land access to Berlin.
He wanted the Soviet Union really to take over all of Berlin. Since the other occupying zones were in the western part of Germany, he tried to starve out Berlin.
The only way into West Berlin now is by plane. For 11 months, the US and Britain carry out the biggest airlift in history, flying over 2 million tons of food and supplies to keep West Berliners alive. In May 1949, realizing the Allies won't give up, Stalin backs down. The Cold War has begun. Stalin fortifies the main border between East and West Germany. The only place which still has freedom of movement between East and West is Berlin.
Well, after my short visit to East Berlin, I think it would be very difficult to avoid giving a bad impression of life there. It's the drabbest, dreariest, most dismal city I've ever seen. Food is still rationed there, and I saw women queuing up to buy potatoes.
As West Germany mobilizes to rebuild its economy with Western support, East Germany is being left behind. To catch up, the communist regime forces workers to meet impossibly high productivity goals. And then, things get worse.
In 1953, when Stalin died in the Soviet Union, the East German authorities said, we're going to redouble our efforts, we're going to make people work harder, and there was an uprising.
In June 1953, thousands of East German people rise up. They want better working conditions, free elections, new leadership.
This caught the East German regime totally off guard. The regime became even more hardline.
Their uprising is swiftly and brutally crushed by Soviet troops and tanks. Dozens are killed. To make sure there's no further trouble, the regime uses the Stasi, East Germany's hated and feared secret police. They spy on almost every aspect of citizens' lives and have a network of thousands of informants. East Germans learned that no one is to be trusted. People are desperate to escape the communist regime. During the 1950s, 3 million East Germans used Berlin as their escape route to the West. A brain drain of the young and the most highly educated.
It wasn't possible to study in East Germany.
Why not?
Because my father isn't a worker.
They leave everything behind, including family. And West Berlin refugee transit camps take them in.
I wanted to go into freedom. I couldn't take this pressure.
Are there lots of other people in East Germany who'd like to come to the West?
Oh, very much, very much.
This drain of talent and economic capacity to the West could not be tolerated for long.
In the middle of a Saturday night, August 13th, 1961, East German border guards roll out a barbed wire fence. 97 miles long, completely surrounding West Berlin. When Berliners wake up Sunday morning, the border between East and West is closed.
This was a big city. You know, think of London, Rome, New York City. To suddenly divide that, and you can't go see your neighbors, you can't go see your parents. That's over.
It was total shock. They hadn't expected that, and then slowly the realization dawned on them that that was it.
This was not just a scar on the city, it was a scar on the soul of Berlin.
West Berlin students hold torchlight demonstrations. The West takes note of the new barrier, but does nothing.
To have pushed back and tried to prevent the construction of the wall could have meant war with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union by that time was, of course, a nuclear power, and therefore, however much the West criticized what happened, no one was going to push back.
Reassured the West won't act, the East German government soon replaces the barbed wire with a permanent concrete wall. But many still escape any way they can. The authorities are forced to build a second wall to keep their citizens in. The land between the two walls becomes known as the Death Strip.
Would-be refugees now face 9 successive obstacles across a cleared strip 100 yards wide. After the first electric fences, a dog run where fierce Alsatians prowl day and night.
Guard towers, spotlights, guard dogs, trip wires, anti-tank obstacles.
There were guard posts that would have lines of sight to shoot people if they were coming across, and shoot people they did.
And then final barrier, a 12-foot high wall with a rounded top, which made it extremely hard to grasp the top of the wall to haul yourself over.
There's almost no hope of escaping to the West now. And ironically, that's exactly why, behind the wall, the East can take its new hard stand.
Despite the formidable obstacles and guards with orders to shoot to kill, hundreds still try to escape to the West. Their methods become increasingly creative and more desperate.
At 9:30, a lorry backed up to the wall on the western side. 5 men were on board with an elaborate device of 2 ladders hinged together.
There were all sorts of ways that people escaped. Some people built hot air balloons and floated over it. Others were smuggled out in secret compartments of cars.
You had tunnels being built down, you had people using the sewers. It was desperate, desperate stuff.
57 people squirmed their way through a narrow tunnel to emerge to freedom. Not one of them was hurt, though East German police discovered the tunnel as the last escapers were moving through and fired a few shots.
The East German response to escapees is brutal.
Even if they suspected that you wanted to escape, or that maybe you knew about someone else who was trying to escape, all of that was grounds to bring you in and interrogate you in one of the Stasi prisons and maybe even keep you there.
If you were caught, or even if you made it, the rest of your family would pay the price. There would be penalties for your friends, your relatives, your parents, your children, other people that you'd left behind. So it was something that was socially, psychologically, unbelievably difficult to contemplate.
The wall becomes a hated symbol for everything that's wrong with the communist empire. Over the next 28 years, 5,000 people succeed in escaping across the wall into the west. Over 140 die trying. In June 1963, to show American support for West Germany, US President John F. Kennedy visits West Berlin.
They turned out in droves and were so excited that finally the American president had come for himself to Berlin.
Thank you. There are some who say that communism is the wave of the future. Let them come to Berlin. As a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Ich bin ein Berliner, Kennedy said. I am a Berliner. He got a huge boost of support from this.
I think Berliners felt enormously encouraged. They felt noticed. They were worried that the world had forgotten them. And their enthusiasm was very genuine.
The East German government is unmoved. It remains committed to hardline Soviet-style socialism. For the next 2 decades, as the Cold War escalates into a nuclear arms race, East Germany and the Berlin Wall stand defiant against the West. But walls are only as strong as the will of those who defend them. And the Soviet Union is about to undergo a radical transformation of will. By the 1980s, the Cold War is at its height, even though the grim, repressive, economically starved lives of the people living under communist rule continues to reach new lows. But in 1985, a glimmer of hope appears. A new leader is elected in Russia, Mikhail Gorbachev. He's relatively young, forward-thinking, and he wants change.
Gorbachev coming to power in Moscow was a game changer, and everybody knew it, everybody could see it.
Well, it was sort of a bombshell for the poor East German leadership under Erich Honecker. This young upstart, from their point of view, comes in and he says, let's talk about all the things that we couldn't talk about before. Let's have perestroika, let's restructure the economy.
Gorbachev wants an open political system and economic growth, hoping these changes will spark the sluggish Soviet economy.
These reforms were viewed with dismay and worry and scorn by East German leader Erich Honecker, feeling if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And we're located here on the border with West Germany. It's too risky. We can't afford these reforms. The Soviets can, we can't.
In the beginning, the West was more suspicious of Gorbachev, but as time went on, they understood that he really did mean what he said. He believed that if the Soviet Union opened up, and tried to reform the economy, allowed criticism, it would become a stronger country.
In 1987, another US president visits West Berlin. Ronald Reagan has come to celebrate 750 years since the city's founding.
Ronald Reagan has never been to the Soviet bloc, but today he stood within yards of it. At his back, the Berlin Wall, a scar he called it, and the Brandenburg Gate. Mr. Reagan had come with a message.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The West Germans felt Reagan had gone too far. They were worried at this confrontational tone. Nobody was thinking the Berlin Wall really could come down. The two Germanys really wouldn't stay separate.
But buoyed by Gorbachev's political changes in Soviet Russia, a wave of new confidence begins to sweep through the rest of communist Europe.
People started thinking, this guy really is not like the Soviet leaders of old. And maybe that's our opportunity to push for reform, to push for change.
By 1989, the Eastern Bloc is crumbling. Poland is the first to fall.
As General Jaruzelski went on state television to announce what amounts to his resignation, outside on the streets of Warsaw, the people were showing the kind of mass opposition that has made his departure seemingly inevitable.
After nearly a decade of mounting pressure from the people's trade union Solidarity, the communist government steps down peacefully. In June, Solidarity becomes the first non-communist government in Poland in over 40 years. East Germans watch intently as the events unfold on West German television.
That fueled the push for change.
People are fired up. Some people are saying, I'm taking to the streets and demanding these changes here. Wir bleiben hier. We are staying here. Others said, I want out. I don't think there are going to be enough changes anytime soon. I want to get out.
In September, the world's attention turns to Hungary when it agrees to open the border to its non-communist neighbor Austria in return for financial aid from West Germany. It's the first hole in the Iron Curtain. And thousands of East Germans seize this opportunity, pouring through Hungary to get to the West.
People were basically driving down to the Hungarian border and basically leaving the cars there with the keys in them and walking over into Austria.
Joachim Lehmann has tried to sell his East German car for the £30 worth of petrol in it, but nobody wants it.
Over 60,000 East Germans escaped the West through Hungary.
Midnight last night on Hungary's border with Austria and jubilation. The Hungarian authorities were releasing the refugees to the west despite protests from the East German government.
The response from the old guard of the East German government? Silence.
The authorities in East Germany didn't know how to deal with it, and they got no guidance from the Soviet Union other than the message that Soviet troops would not be used to put down peaceful demonstrators.
The few signals are that they are determined to fight, extolling with ritualistic and propagandist slogans the wonders of the East German socialist state and the wickedness of Hungary and West Germany for what's happened in recent days.
In a final desperate attempt to stop the exodus, the East German government closes its last open border with Czechoslovakia, imprisoning their people. For East Germans, it's the final straw.
It was actually the city of Leipzig that many see as the heart of the popular demonstrations.
Throughout October 1989, thousands pour into the streets of Leipzig to protest.
70,000 people individually decided it's worth it. I am going out to march. Some of whom beforehand filled out their last will and testament with their lawyers.
If the East German government was under any doubt about the conviction of these people, then the sheer scale of tonight's demonstration will prove to them that the pressure for change will not go away.
They were incredibly brave because they risked arrest, imprisonment, physical torture.
East Germans did not know whether taking to the streets would mean they would lose their lives.
Leipzig, October 1989. Throughout East Germany, the Communist Authority is under increasing pressure.
These were scenes unprecedented in the city's history. Banners calling for free elections, free travel and a free press, and the people demanding new leadership. The demonstrators literally took over the entire city center.
They marched together peacefully, carrying candles and singing around the ring road in the center of Leipzig, past the secret police headquarters.
To everyone's relief and surprise, the police don't interfere.
So that's the night that East Germans say, that's the night we lost our fear.
This was genuine people power. This was people who were emboldened by what was happening in the Soviet Union and in the other East European countries to believe that they had the right to take things into their own hands and to demand change.
That level of pressure put politicians in a situation where 30 years earlier, or 20 years earlier even, they would have just called the troops out. They would have just shot a few people dead and said, well, these are anti-fascists and we're fighting the fascists. Don't forget the Berlin Wall is an anti-fascist wall. It's not a Berlin Wall, it's keeping them out, not keeping you in.
Just over 100 miles away in East Berlin, tensions rise. People look for a way out and turn to the American embassy. 18 East Germans have already taken refuge here. When the doors open, more try to get inside, until the East German police put a stop to it.
The authorities were coming under increasing pressure, the protests were growing and growing, and so they finally realized that what they should do is at least allow East Germans to travel to West Berlin, possibly West Germany.
In other parts of East Berlin, the atmosphere is getting tense. Angry crowds gather outside official buildings, openly defiant. In Alexanderplatz, more protesters. People are no longer afraid, they will be heard.
It was ultimate people power. It really was the people who brought this about. People of East Berlin and the people of East Germany recognized that they could begin to protest in a way they'd never been able to do before, and that effectively the regime was giving up.
On the evening of Thursday, November 9th, 1989, events move quickly. At a live press conference, senior communist spokesman Günter Schabowski casually makes this announcement.
Today we have decided to introduce measures permitting every citizen of the DDR to leave for the Federal Republic by any crossing points.
And he added it would happen immediately.
And before even the last sentence, journalists start rushing out of the press conference and calling back to New York or wherever their bosses are and saying, you know, world headlines here. The Berlin Wall is open.
Within minutes of the news being broadcast, East Berliners grab their passports and rush to the checkpoints.
After 4 decades of draconian travel restrictions, they did not believe what they'd heard on radio and television, that all bureaucratic obstacles to free travel were lifted immediately.
In a few seconds, it's over. The Berlin Wall simply doesn't matter anymore.
We live here for 20 years and it's the first day, it's wonderful. We couldn't go yet
What are you going to do in the West?
Only look and then return.
I'm living here for 5 years and I haven't ever been to West Berlin. And now it's the first time I can go there and it's a nice feeling to see it.
Are you going to come back?
Of course.
For some, this is a golden opportunity. If the border to West Berlin is open, they're going for good. For others, uncertainty.
That moment was a huge moment in history. It changed the lives of Berliners, of Germans, of Europeans, of so many people in the world. It gave people hope. The vast majority of people thought the Berlin Wall won't come down in my lifetime.
As the night wears on, after a brief visit to the West Side, most East Berliners simply return home.
We was there 10 minutes.
Only 10 minutes?
Yes.
After all this time?
Yes. We are walking around the streets and looking, all we can see.
And how do you feel now?
Wonderful. Wonderful, I can't say anything.
The wall at Brandenburg Gate, the heart of Berlin, is not a legal crossing point. But the people of Berlin simply don't care.
Come on! Come!
West Berliners pull East Berliners onto the wall to celebrate in front of mobilized troops.
It was anarchic. All power had drained away. Nobody was in charge. Everything was happening. Everybody was moving. Everybody was coming up to the wall, both sides of it. And yet, I don't think we ever thought it would actually come down.
I climbed over the wall and come and walk through the Brandenburg Gate. I jumped over the wall.
You jumped over the wall?
Yeah. It's a great feeling.
I'm happy. I have been dreaming of this for years, and I don't know what to say. I'm happy.
Berlin turns into one big street party. Confused soldiers attempt to take control.
You must go to the other side.
But why have you decided to take this action?
Passions erupt after decades of oppression.
So at 3 o'clock in the morning, we've discovered the limit of the tolerance of the security forces here at the Brandenburg Gate. Security forces who simply were not prepared for the extraordinary events and concessions and changes that the politicians have now made in East Germany.
This was an absolutely magical evening that they thought would never happen.
As dawn broke at the Berlin Wall this morning, all that was missing were the bulldozers and the demolition equipment. With East Germans freely crossing to the west and meeting others returning home of their own accord, the redundancy of the Berlin Wall now seemed absolute.
Of course, many people wondered, what are the Soviets going to do? How long is this going to last? There are 400,000 Soviet troops surrounding Berlin.
The border at the Berlin Wall has been open just 24 hours. Now, everyone wants to know how Moscow is going to respond. November 9th, 1989. Berlin makes history and celebrates. The Berlin Wall, symbol of division in the Cold War, has been breached.
Anyone who either was there or anyone who watched it on TV will never forget that moment.
The big question now is, how will the Soviet Union react? Will there be a violent crackdown?
What are the Soviets going to do? Was Gorbachev really the reformist he said he was? This was the moment of truth.
In the days that follow, Berliners and the world breathe a sigh of relief. It's clear Soviet forces will not be mobilized.
Gorbachev made it clear he wasn't sending in the troops, he wasn't insisting on closing up the border, but he definitely wanted order. He wasn't going to turn back the clock.
The old streets of Potsdamer Platz suddenly revealed for the first time as cranes lifted the last sections of the Berlin Wall. East Berliners rushed forward for their first glimpse of what had been the heart of Old Berlin. In their midst, Mayor Krack of East Berlin, heading for an historic meeting with West Berlin's mayor right on the border. They were engulfed in the crush that dissolved years of Cold War rhetoric in the divided city in a moment of goodwill.
I am happy that this is opened here. This was the important point of Old Berlin. Here was it where the traffic flow over, and still it will be an important traffic point.
East German soldiers and West German police marked the opening with a gesture of friendship. They didn't notice that above them, West Berlin teenagers had climbed on top of the wall.
Just days after November 9th, British news anchor Jon Snow reports from Berlin assessing the city's future.
Asking the question, what happens now the wall is open, is something the strategists never posed, because none of the experts ever believed things would work out this way.
30 years later, Snow believes the West just never saw this coming.
I do think the West misjudged it. I think British intelligence, American intelligence, was quite convinced there would be gunfire and violence and killing to stop people coming over. But, of course, what they didn't factor in was that actually there had been a massive demonstrations in East Germany for a long time before the wall actually came down.
In just 3 days, the world has seen the city transformed from one divided by a cruel wall to one where its citizens from both East and West may come and go as they please.
Every day, there are long lines at the border as East Berliners look to sample life in West Berlin.
Through Checkpoint Charlie, and the Krauleidis step onto Western soil for the first time in their lives.
Then, a line at the bank. They're given 200 Deutschmarks, about $75. Welcome money, a gift from the West German government. Brand new sneakers are tempting, but they're $60. He makes just $50 a week.
It's extraordinary. This is probably the busiest shopping day West Berlin has ever known. Just look at the crowds down there. The irony of it is, most of them are East Berliners, and they simply aren't buying anything.
It's soon clear there are big differences between the East and the West.
In communism, there was full employment. The joke was they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. Okay, you didn't get a lot of money, but you had a job. Many in the East were thinking, now's our chance to really reform communist East Germany. Others were saying, I just want to go shopping in the West. I want to be able to get nice things. I think I want the Western system.
For many East Germans, the temptation to defect is too strong. Within weeks of the wall opening up, over 100,000 migrate to the West Side, and West Berliners are not happy.
Lots of people in West Germany who said, yeah, and we're going to pay the bill. Somehow our nice life is going to be compromised by these people who are going to drag us down. And so there was a sense of tension between East and West.
But East Germany is virtually bankrupt. Its economy's collapsing.
The East German economy was, by Western capitalist standards, a complete basket case, basically unprofitable, propped up by subsidies. Firms closed down, often firms that existed even before communism, and a lot of very unhappy East Germans who felt betrayed.
And as more unexpected differences crop up, people begin to ask questions about the future. Would East and West Germany become one?
There was great uncertainty, and the West Germans were very cautious. In fact, the West German authorities in those weeks following the lifting of the wall were very, very cautious. They did not want to move immediately towards the idea of reunification.
Berliners have made history, but can they make this work? Or will the promise of a new Germany fall apart? And what will a new, unified, and powerful Germany mean for the rest of Europe and the world?
Berliners are proclaiming a new era.
On November 9th, 1989, Germans celebrated the fall of the Berlin Wall, a symbol of oppression gone overnight.
Showered with champagne and cheered by a crowd of thousands, it was clear this would be one of Berlin's most dramatic days. The wall that was built overnight is being transformed overnight,
And across the city, Berliners are seized with a sense that this is a turning point in German history.
Since then, East Germans have been flooding into the West. Spirits are high on both sides as the new arrivals are welcomed across the border.
Across the city at Checkpoint Charlie, 1,400 East Germans came west today, some just for a look, some to stay.
So it was a great party atmosphere to start with. I think that mood changes, though, fairly quickly.
What the West Germans found was that the economy was bankrupt in the East. That meant jobs were difficult to come by. That meant that the people who were left in the East became quite resentful.
Now that the Berlin Wall is breached, what does the future look like for East and West Germany?
It wasn't at all clear that East Germany would unify with West Germany.
It's a new society they have to build, and they don't understand yet how to reorient themselves from a one-party system, which they have had for more than 40 years, to a multi-party structure.
I hope it will be a strong opposition, because if there isn't a strong opposition, the other can make what they want.
A vocal section of the crowd voiced resentment at the pace of German unification being forced by West German political leaders.
You get two quite distinct generations, those socialised under Nazism who build up the GDR, and those socialised within the GDR who try and tear it down or reform it from within. They were the ones who were the idealists who became critical of how socialism was being realised in practice.
But other nations of the Soviet Eastern Bloc, seeing what happened in Berlin, aren't waiting for reform.
The fall of the wall and the fall of the communist regime in East Germany were part of a broader process.
What happened in one country did have an impact on what happened in other countries. So they looked at their neighbors and they thought, if they can do this, why can't we?
On November 17th, 8 days after the fall of the Berlin Wall, thousands take to the streets of Prague.
Czechoslovakia's pro-democracy movement has sprung alive after 2 decades of enforced silence. They are calling it the dawn of change.
On December 10th, 1989, the Czechs triumph and form a new government.
More than 40 years of communist domination is ending here, now, in this room. Thousands of voices joined in the national anthem.
They call it the Velvet Revolution, in a nod to how smoothly it all went down. The same could not be said of Romania's transition.
Ceausescu and his wife, in fact, were executed. And their bodies, their dead bodies, were shown on TV. So the people really knew that their dictatorial leader had been killed.
In the chaos that follows, over 1,000 people lose their lives.
The cost of that freedom has been paid in blood. The death toll has slowed down, but it is still rising, which explains why hospitals must stockpile coffins they are expecting to fill.
There are many people who want to stop us, but I think they cannot do it now. It's all over.
The last Soviet-controlled country to fall is Hungary. They hold their first free elections in March 1990.
I think a lasting tribute to the people of Eastern Europe and their courage that they had hope, and when people keep hope alive, change is possible.
In just 8 months, the Soviet Union has crumbled. 6 different nations have won their independence from communist regimes.
Smashing the Berlin Wall was like ripping the Iron Curtain aside.
Back in East Germany, in March of 1990, the first free elections are held since Hitler was voted into office in 1933.
Whoever wins, East Germany's new leaders are likely to be overshadowed by their West German counterparts once the unification process gets underway.
There is then a nasty political edge as officials dust off the ballot boxes which long guaranteed Erich Honecker's Communist Party consecutive landslide victories. The excitement of the first ever free election is tinged with apprehension.
In the end, it's the Western-backed Democrats who win the election. And just like that, the stage is set for West and East Germany to be reunited. If they can figure out how. In Germany, October 3rd, 1990 will forever be celebrated as German Unity Day. But the actual process of merging proves to be anything but smooth. After all, they're two very different worlds.
Whole towns in East Germany had been built up around factories. Well, those factories had been polluting the air, so these factories were closed down very quickly, and suddenly whole towns of people have no job. This was not their dream of unification. So there was initially in the 1990s, particularly among people 50 and above, it was much harder for them to make the transition.
There was a lot of kind of individual resentment that old ways were being lost, even though, of course, the communist aspect was all over. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all.
But through the 1990s, Berlin, once divided by the most infamous wall in history, becomes a city where you can make money.
If people wanted to invest, suddenly Berlin was a great place to invest. They had rebuilding contracts. They had to redo all the sewage contracts because the East Germans had redone them all. They had to build new railways, new bridges, and that gave a huge boost to the Berlin economy.
And before long, Germany, with a population of 83 million, is reasserting itself as one of the economic powerhouses of the world.
Well, of course, it vastly strengthened Europe because suddenly Germany was Germany again. Germany was one big, potentially strong economy, and the rest.
There are some 17 major building developments promised in Berlin, including one that'll begin here next week. So where are we exactly? Well, this is Checkpoint Charlie. The original porter cabin is now literally a museum piece. And this is the building development we're promised around that famous crossroads.
It really meant that the European Union, that Europe itself was hugely strengthened by this, even though the costs to Germany of bringing unification to the East Germans were immense.
An historic moment of defiance. November 9th and 10th, 1989. Piece by piece, the Berlin Wall was taken down. A moment that defined the end of an entire era.
It's that image, of course, that went around the world. Watching people hammering on it and taking pieces of it away was such a powerful image that I think that remains the dominant image of the end of the Cold War and the end of communism in Europe.
Well, I think it's tremendously significant for history. The East Germans who'd lived in this suffocating repressive system for 40 years, they didn't give up their desire for freedom, their desire for self-determination. They persisted.
Then, just before 10 o'clock, the moment Berliners had waited 28 years for.
It took effectively 2 world wars and the falling of the wall in 1989 to finally give Europe a sense of openness back, a sense of possibility back. And that's why it was so significant.
It was the biggest event in our lifetimes, the biggest event since the end of the Second World War, and an event which has had a profound and very important impact.
The fall of the Berlin Wall on November 1989, I think, is one of the most significant moments of the 20th century. In one night, it encapsulated the end of the Cold War because the Berlin Wall stood as the symbol of how rigid that Cold War was. And number 2, it had been a symbol of communist oppression. The fall of the wall was an epic and magical moment in world history.